Hey everyone, and welcome to Already Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 3, Episode 22. It is called The Most Toys. So, full spoilers for the episode, as always. This episode sees Data kidnapped by a collector of sorts in space, someone who collects rare items. I mean, it's essentially a collector from the Marvel movies, let's be honest. It was hard not to draw comparisons as it was revealing what it was doing. Basically, this guy, this sort of huckster, sells the Enterprise, or sells the Federation, maybe to be more accurate, a bunch of this resource that they're going to need to, save this planet from a natural disaster. And they're getting this Data's transporting it shuttle by shuttle because it's too unstable.
Volatile?
Yeah, too unstable for the transporters, for the transporter beams specifically. So, but basically they fake an explosion to make it appear as if Data's died. And an explosion in the shuttle.
I mean, don't fake the explosion. The shuttle does explode.
Well, the shuttle does explode, but they fake the idea. They put in like enough material that would match Data's like parts and structure to make them convinced on a simple scan. Hey, Data was in there and he's gone now. And because they have to go and save this natural disaster, or save this planet from the natural disaster, they can't stick around and necessarily investigate completely immediately. So it's this very sad moment. In fact, I think one of my favorite things about the explosion itself is the one who actually says something first, because they're all kind of shocked and they're all sort of staring. It's actually Worf who sort of says Data first. He's the first one who kind of speaks it in shock. And it's that simple thing where you take the sort of the toughest, meanest, hardest character and you have them be the ones get emotional first, because it kind of it sells it for everyone else. If he's breaking down a little bit because of it, then everyone obviously is feeling this.
Yeah, I will say this moment, while strong, I think it was very slightly undercut by the fact that we did this with Data like 2 episodes ago. At the end of the one, at the end of the one with the empath abilities.
Sure.
Where Data was on that thing that just exploded. Oh, never mind, he's fine. It wasn't played like that so much in that episode. It was very brief and just kind of at the end, and he was fine straight away. But it was hard not to think about that this had just happened while I was watching it.
It never even occurred to me. Because they're played so differently, I never even thought of that moment until you mentioned it right now.
That's fair enough.
So, I guess your mileage may vary on that, kind of being in your mind as this happens. But the actual episode, once it gets going, obviously you've got the Enterprise, the crew, Geordi especially, as kind of the closest thing Data has to a best friend, dealing with this and struggling with not accepting that something's not quite adding up here. But the main plot, of course, is Data with this character. The actor who, of course, I recognise from Frasier, for the most part, Saul Rubinek, he plays Fajo here. I think we recently saw him on that Amazon show, Hunters. He was in that.
I'll take your word for it. I just know the guy. I've seen him in stuff. But
obviously he's much older now in that show, because that was like this year, and this was 30 years ago.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, I don't remember much about that episode. It wasn't that memorable, weirdly.
Sure. We watched 2, but sure.
We watched 2? Oh, bloody hell.
So he plays Fajo, who's this guy who's stole Data, who's kidnapped Data. And the episode is essentially Data in captivity, how he tries to fight this, how Fajo counteracts everything Data might try to do to escape. And that's kind of it. That's the gist of it. So we'll get into it. But I'll ask you the question. How did you feel about The Most Toys?
I would like this 30 or 40% more if you cut most of the Data plot. I think all there's some nice beats in there that are all right, but most of the stuff on the Enterprise with them kind of trying to deal with the loss and going through it, I think would be much more effective without us cutting back to Data constantly. I think that stuff is really strong and would be even stronger if we weren't just constantly going back to Data, for me at least.
Interesting.
You feel the opposite?
It's not so much that I feel the opposite. I think the stuff on the Enterprise is solid enough, and like seeing Geordi trying his best to figure this out. He can't let this rest because he knows something's not quite right, something's not adding up. And the beats, with Picard and that finally kind of realize that something's going on here, and they realize that something's not quite right. They've been tricked, especially when it becomes apparent that the natural disaster seems to have been manufactured so that they would have to go to this one person who has this one particular thing that can help with the natural disaster. and he wouldn't even make a profit doing this. If anything, he would be losing money on setting this up and doing this whole ruse. So it's not just like he's wanting to unload the crap that he's got. This is more than that. And it's like, wait, what would he possibly want? And then they sort of realize, and yeah, it's kind of exciting when Picard's like, Crusher, turn this around right now. Get us there, Warp 8. But I think you're mad. I think the data stuff is what makes this episode work, and it's what makes this episode have its point. And because what this episode is putting Data in a situation with someone who is so awful, the type of person that Data's never had to deal with before, and how Data tries to work around this type of person is the entire point of this episode. And if you take all that out, then I mean, yeah, okay, you've got an interesting episode about how the crew react to Data seemingly dying, essentially. Like, how did they react to the death of Data? That's essentially what it would turn into, and just be that on its own. But for me, what makes this interesting is how Data has to interact with this character, and then ultimately where it goes in the ending. So
I really like the ending of this. Which is why I wouldn't cut it completely. I would cut it down, and I think I would probably offload it to the second half of the episode mostly. I think a lot of my problem comes from them. We're cutting back to Data so much with the Enterprise stuff, especially early on, right after it happens, that I feel like it undercuts anything that's on the Enterprise. I feel like we should spend maybe just 10 or 15 solid minutes on the Enterprise with them dealing with things, and then we can start doing some of the Data stuff and have a lot of the interactions that he does have just a little bit more condensed, maybe not quite as many interactions, because I do like the overall point of what it does with that stuff, for sure.
I think my hesitation to even, like, at least partially agree with what you just said is that I would speculate that you might actually have an alternate complaint if it went like 10-15 minutes almost under the guise of Data actually died and we're watching everyone react to it. Like, I feel like the complaint could then turn into that we know Data's not dead. Like, not even from the context of we know he's in the rest of the show or anything like that, just from the context
because he's the main character. Yeah, one of the main characters. Yeah, I get it. No, and here's the thing. I don't mind when shows do this thing where they pretend they're dead if they give it weight. If it matters in the episode. I think that's what bothers me here is I don't feel the weight of it mattering to the Enterprise in this episode because we're cutting back to Data so much. And it's not, well, Data's obviously alive. I know that. We all know that. I just think it really highlights it and draws attention to it when it cuts straight back to it, of him just sitting there when Geordie's, crying his eyes out, basically.
No, I quite like this episode, and I think the time it spends with Data and Faja, where he slowly kind of realizes just who this person is, and like how he can't, because Data wakes up and he's in this room with other collectibles, and Faja comes in, and he's like, and Data has this sort of like, wait, have you taken me against my will? This is completely illegal, and I have duties as part of Starfleet, blah blah. And he tries to leave. He can't get out the door because the door's designed to not open unless it actually. I mean, I assume it's also specific DNA, not just anyone's DNA. But the idea being that it just won't work for an android.
I assume it's programmed to all the people who work there.
Yeah, but the idea being that, like, okay, sheer strength might do it if there was like 10 of you, but there's not 10 of you. In fact, the whole point is that you're one of a kind, and that's why he wanted them, because he wanted Data, because he's this rare, precious thing, and. He shows him around, like, these other collectibles that he's got. Some of it's like, old baseball cards, but some of it's more sci-fi stuff from the future that, we don't know yet. Typically something Star Trek always does, whenever it goes as a list of things in the past, it'll give us one or two of stuff that's really happened because it's before the show was made, and then it'll give us a couple that are, decades or centuries later to like give us some range. And, this is a fine formula for these kind of things. That's not a complaint. So... But we have this thing where Faja becomes this despicable human being, where this is a genuine kidnapping in the sense that Data tries to fight back, because he immediately tries to sort of make him open the door by force, and he's like, no, he's got a force field, you can't do it, it won't work. Okay, so he started that, which again makes sense, because why wouldn't he try and think of all the ways that Data could try and escape? And essentially it becomes about kind of like, in a weird way, breaking Data's will, even though they acknowledge that Data doesn't really have will in the traditional way that other people have will. And when he has Will Riker.
That was terrible.
Punchline.
That was absolutely awful.
But
you do not deserve that drum sound.
Yes, I deserve it. Everyone gets that. That drum sound whores itself out to anyone who makes a bad joke, and you know it. So don't even start. Right. But, but slowly as the episode goes on, like, you know, because he comes across as being friendly, but he's also very demanding in the way he asks Data to do certain things. He's like, I don't want you to wear that uniform. You're going to dress how I want you to be dressed, and you're going to sit in that chair, and you're going to be there to entertain me and my guests. That's what your purpose is. And very quickly he starts threatening people. Like, is it okay? I can't threaten Data because nothing I can do can hurt him. But he does burn off his clothes, which feels very cruel. But it's just his uniform, though. It's not a big deal in the grand scheme of things.
Ultimately, hurting him would defeat the point of why he wants him.
Exactly. But then he starts to threaten to kill his hench people, who it's kind of like they've kind of accepted where they are, so it doesn't necessarily sound exactly like a kidnapping, but at the same time, it feels like they are kind of trapped, and if they ever...
It's a little bit Stockholm Syndrome, isn't it?
Yeah. And he, outright threatens to kill the woman that's there, like, serving him, and Data, of course, will not let, human life be taken, and the question, of course, has Data ever killed someone? And Data's like, no, I haven't, although I am trained in the line of combat if the need arises to do so. But he's never murdered someone. He would never consider murdering someone, which is very important for where the episode goes at the end. Because ultimately what this episode becomes, because it does a really good job of making you hate Faja, because he is awful. He is awful to Data. He's like, no, they think you're dead, Data. They're never coming for you. You're completely alone. You belong to me. It's full-on kidnapped in, like, a secret room somewhere. Like, it has all those makings of someone who's completely... Because Data we think of as being, kind of a superhero in the sense that he does have super strength. He can, access any kind of, forgive the word, data. He can do all these things.
You can just say information when you don't want to, say data again.
Sure, but whatever. We can go with it. Just roll with it. So all of this builds up to make us really see him as evil, to the point where when the woman eventually comes and says, okay, I'll help you escape, like, can you take me away from here, blah, blah, and Data's like, of course I can. And, they're on their way, and they're trying this escape, and eventually Faja shows up, and he's got his gun and whatnot, and he basically just makes this choice to kill her out of, like, punishment, because he sort of does this shrug where he's not going to do it, and then just does it anyway, and then says, well, Data, if you don't do what, I'm, what I say, I'm just going to kill the next person. And he kind of banks, because Data picks up the gun, right? This is kind of the big moment towards the end, regardless of what the Enterprise is doing, because the Enterprise is literally about to beam him out, right? Because by this point, they've figured out, they've got an idea, they're looking for him, they know that he's in danger, they're coming. And he's got the phaser in his hand, and Faja's like, well, you're not going to kill me, we know you're going to do that. And if you don't do what I say, I'll just kill another person, and I'll keep killing more people unless you do exactly what I want. You will be obedient. You will do exactly what I say.
It's the end of Man of Steel.
Whatever. The point is that because there's several scenes in the episode as well where, like, he has a guest then, and Data refuses to say anything in front of the guest, basically presenting himself as a mannequin rather than an actual thinking, intelligent android. And this really upsets him, and he wants to punish him for it. Faja gets really pissed about it, and it gives us all these things that slowly over the course of the episode. And then he murders this woman who wants to actually escape and maybe wants to, basically Data's convinced her, give her hope that, oh, maybe there is, like, a future out of here. Maybe I can get away. Maybe there is something better, people who will actually stick up for me, that kind of thing. Which, it's even just inspiring that Data can inspire that in someone. And that's even a point Picard makes earlier in the episode. He's like, for an android who couldn't feel anything, he certainly inspired a lot of feelings in others. He definitely, like, everyone's hurting bad and so on, Geordi especially. But ultimately, what the episode is about pushing Data to that point, and it's a thing that I think most of us go through, human beings, at some point. Not obviously in this particular life and death scenario, but we get to a point where we consider the possibility that is it worth killing someone if they're that bad, that the world is a safer place, like everyone else is safer because this person is so vile, that is it the right to take them out of the picture? Is it right to, even though it's technically in the moment itself, cold blood? Arguably you could see it as kind of revenge, but ultimately I don't know if it necessarily is, because the character, in the moment he's talking about it, he's literally saying, I will keep killing people to keep you obedient.
Yeah, I think you could argue there is a personal element of revenge driving it, just because by its nature, it's there by the nature of this relationship that's formed over the episode, but I don't think it's the driving purpose. In
this specific moment, but just on the broad context of things though, when I'm talking about people deciding, should this person be murdered or killed to save other people in the long run?
Someone gives you a gun and says, right, this person in front of you is going to kill 10,000 people in the next year. You can stop them right now.
Yeah, the difference being though is that in this case he knows he's going to do it. He's given him enough proof and enough of experience over the episode to believe him when he says he's going to keep killing people. And the only thing stopping him, the only thing allowing him to do this is his belief that Data, under no circumstance, will just shoot him in the back. And, Data has to make a choice here, and it gives us this wonderful, ambiguous thing. I mean, somewhat ambiguous. It's kind of like... I fully believe Data tried to shoot him, right?
I think it's ambiguous in the sense that Data presents a story that is intentionally ambiguous enough that he can get away with it. But the intention of what's really happened, I don't think is left ambiguous for us, the viewers.
I think there's enough wiggle room that if later they wanted to prove... I don't think they will, but if they wanted to, technically they could prove that nothing was actually happening. But Data in this moment is making a choice whether or not he should just kill this person. And I think this idea that he's never encountered someone this vile, like on a personal basis before, like kind of one-on-one scenario where this person is so vile and so evil to the people around him and has disregard for life in a way that Data has regard for life. Data really values life. He longs for more of a life than he has.
And I would also say what's important about this situation, in context of Data's never encountered someone like this, is presumably anytime he has encountered, any sort of, war criminal, some terrible person, he's had a superior officer to make the decision.
Yeah, he's never felt helpless and alone in the situation. And again, obviously with Data feeling sort of a weird thing to talk about, but I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that he essentially does feel, just not in the same way that humans do. Okay?
I think the scene where you have, Geordie going through his belongings, and he has...
Which, by the way, Tasha Yar's hologram, still there.
But, I mean, that's a level of caring and attachment to these belongings. If that's not some level of feeling on some fundamental level, attachment is linked to feeling, then because he's chose these things. It's not like he's just kept things because he knows he's supposed to. He has specifically chosen these things.
I think it opens up a debate for me where, okay, maybe he doesn't feel things in the same way that human beings do, but that ultimately the end result of his thought processes and his sort of logical kind of conclusions essentially get to the same point. And at that point, it's like, okay, what do we actually define as feelings? Because he definitely feels in this moment, again, and I'm using that word intentionally here, that he probably needs to kill this person, and therefore it's a justifiable execution. It's a justifiable action that he's going to take.
Yeah, I think the old saying of how any sufficiently advanced science is indistinguishable from magic ultimately boils down to Data in this case, where if it's sufficiently indistinguishable here as to the type of feelings, it ultimately doesn't matter. It is what it is.
Yeah, it's this weird thing where he essentially broke Data down, just kind of like how someone who's captive or in a situation like this, their spirits will eventually break. It's essentially what happens to him here. Like this sort of final murder here of this woman is kind of the blow that Data needs to go over that line. And so he gets beamed out of the situation to the Enterprise, and O'Brien notes that, hey, there's like a weapon discharged like mid, as the beam was going, the transportation, there's a beam in there, and Riker just says, okay, well, nullify it, disable it, right? So
don't bring that blast along.
Yeah, and Data shows up and he's holding the beam, and they question it, and he says something like, what was it he said? What's his excuse? He says something like,
he says must have been a readings malfunction or something.
Yeah. And
essentially blames the transporter.
Yeah, the final scene though is that he goes to the cell where they've got Faja, because Faja, of course, has been arrested for everything he's done here, as you'd expect. And Data goes to see him, very Hannibal Lecter-ish, right? Because again, we're using that set again. We've got the brig essentially, yeah. And he comes to see him, and Faja's like, "Oh, I bet you, I'm going to get out here and I'm going to do this again, and blah blah. This must be great for you. You must be loving seeing me get my comeuppance." And Data's final point is basically just, I have no feelings. I'm an android. And he walks off, and it's kind of to the point where I almost leave myself questioning it, going, is he saying that because it's true, or because he knows this will upset Faja more? This idea that everything Faja did, because Faja's one solace right now is that he's clung into him, and he's affected him, and he's changed him, and he's kind of ruined part of his life, essentially, right? Because if this happened to a human being, right, like the killer would kind of gloat and be like, well, you're always going to remember what I did to you, you're always going to remember me, right? That kind of idea.
Yeah.
And Faja is like, well, I bet that you're loving this. And even though he's sort of saying that in a way where it's kind of against him, I think part of it is almost like, yeah, because I got to you. And Data's like, no, I'm an android. I simply don't care.
Good. Yeah.
And he just walks out. And, Faja's left standing there in the cell, just kind of on his own. And obviously, as he points out the symmetry of this as well, where now he's in the box, trapped. But so I love all this stuff. I actually really love this prodding of Data's character and the idea, because I think what it does successfully is, I think over the course of the episode, it makes. No, I mean, Data didn't feel helpless in the sense that I always knew that ultimately the Enterprise was going to come back and bring the cavalry, right? That was always going to happen by the end of the episode. But it convinced me of the situation feeling from his perspective kind of hopeless, and Faja being this evil, and the idea of Data having to essentially just reach a decision on how to handle this type of person. He does it through, because I love the idea that what he essentially does actually mimics how humans would tackle this. Just he thinks about it differently, but he tries the door, that doesn't work. He tries the captor, so why wouldn't you try the captor? With a human being in a captive situation, maybe because they always have a weapon on them, similar to his blocker thing, right? Yeah. And then okay, so he can't do that. Can he be disobedient? Can he not give the person what they want from this captive situation?
Not give them the satisfaction.
Yeah. And he tries that, and then that's maybe going to bring more punishment. He's like, oh, you will do what I say. So I kind of love that ultimately through logic, he essentially does what human beings would do through feeling and through instinct. Sure. But he essentially gets to the same beats. And then the idea that Data was willing to, essentially in cold blood, even is justifiable in as much as he deserves it by the time you get to that point in the episode. So I don't think this makes Data feel like a dark character. I think you get to the end of this episode, and he is so deserving of what was about to happen to him that you don't look at Data and go, Data's turned to the dark side or anything like that. I think you just look at Data and go, no, in that moment, any other human being would probably be considering the exact same thing. I mean, it wouldn't play out the same because, if it was a human being, they would, the bad guy would never assume that you couldn't shoot him. He would,
Sure.
He would treat it differently. But, forgetting that part of it, in the same situation, a human being, I don't think you'd blame anyone who's been held captive. If you're watching Room starring Brie Larson, if Brie Larson, this is no spoilers for the movie, I'm not saying this happens in the movie, but let's say there's a big...
This is a wild headcanon ending now.
Yeah, but let's say there's a big ending to that movie where Brie Larson gets a hold of a gun, and if she shot the guy who'd held her captive for years in that
He'll never
basement,
do it to anyone again.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the justification, is Data's saving other people by doing this, right?
Because he's not worried about himself at this point. He's safe. This guy won't hurt him because it would ruin his prize. Which,
interestingly, it does kind of line up with Starfleet's teachings, right? It's the Federation's teachings is that this is not about him. It's about him protecting others around him and stopping harm. So I mean, you jokingly compare it to the end of the Man of Steel to annoy me, but honestly, this does that moment way better than Man of Steel.
That was kind of what I was getting at. Yeah, I say this is the ending of Man of Steel because Man of Steel thinks it can do this, and I don't think I enjoyed this episode quite as much as you did overall.
Mm-hmm.
I really like this ending stuff with Data though. I really do want to make that clear. I think it's 1,000 times better than the equivalent moment in Man of Steel.
Well, part of it's just as simple as they actually set this up in this episode. They had a conversation earlier on talking about why Data wouldn't kill or what under circumstances he would kill, and. As much as, I'm saying it's in cold blood because he's sort of doing it with his back's turned, so the moment itself does feel kind of, to quote Malcolm Reynolds, the whole, if I ever shoot you, you'll be facing me and you'll be armed kind of idea. It's not that honourable sort of murder in that sense, or that killing in that sense, but in the context of the bigger picture about why Data thinks he needs to kill him, it actually does kind of fit in with the idea of the greater good, and, okay, this has to be dealt with, because clearly... in my current situation, this is the only way I can stop him, because clearly everything else I've tried has failed. Everything I've tried to do peacefully has failed. This is kind of the last ditch effort here.
Yeah.
But luckily for him, Geordi figured out that Data, there was a weird, omission that Data didn't follow protocol. Even though most people would just skip that part, Data wouldn't, because he's Data.
And that makes... I think this is... why it frustrated me a little bit in the sense that I really like the other stuff on the Enterprise, and I feel like if you go from the start of them knowing Data's been kidnapped, but for whatever reason, he's got a blocker up that they can't just instead of the thing that they're transporting out is volatile, just say he's got a thing that you can't transport in and out of, right? It's as simple as that. So they can't rescue Data there and then. They know he's alive, but they also believe there is still a genuine crisis happening on this other place that they need to go and save. So they make the decision to just go and, right, Data will be fine for a day or two. He'll survive. We've got a planet to save. We'll be back for him. If you take that route and then not going the route of, oh my god, Data's dead, and doing that stuff, maybe I'd enjoy the Data stuff, and it focusing more on that even more.
That's it. I did really like a couple of things that came out of them thinking Data was dead. I love the choice of like Worf taking his post, and also the conversation, especially with I think it's Troy speaking to him, where she brings it up, and it's like, yeah, you actually replaced Tasha's job. You took her job and she died. He brings it up. He's like, this is the second time I've taken a dead crew member's job.
Yeah, and him saying how no, he's honoring them by doing the job as well as he hopes they would have done. Yeah,
and then the moment in the bridge I thought was wonderful when Picard accidentally calls him Data. Like that was a wonderful moment. And
this is why I'm saying I really like this Enterprise stuff. And I think even though I like the Data ending a lot, I think for the vast majority of the episode I like what's going on the Enterprise more. I think it's more hard hitting for most of the episode, not the ending.
The problem is though is that I like the slow sort of realization from Data and his predicament, but the real problem is though is that ending with Data that you agree you like a lot, I don't think that works at all if we don't spend at least close to as much time with him.
No, I'm coming around from what I said at the start about pacing and things, and I'm coming around and maybe coming to the realization that this should have been two separate episodes. One episode with this Data stuff, and like I say, they just realize that they know from the start he's kidnapped, but they make the choice to go and save the planet anyway and just come back for Data after. And Data still goes through his journey. The Enterprise is a fine B-plot that I don't give a shit about, as in a lot of B-plots in Star Trek, let's be honest. And it's fine. You have some fun character banter and that's it. And then we do this stuff with the loss of a crewmate. Maybe it's Data, maybe you do it with someone else. I think Data is a good one to do it with in general, because I do like every single beat they do in this episode with that, and have like an episode focused on that as a second episode instead of in the same one. I think ultimately that's probably the ideal scenario for me, which is a little bit different to where I started this discussion, I think.
Yeah, well, I don't have that problem with the episode, so I'm quite happy they're both here, and I like that they link up the way they do. That's a great episode, honestly. I kind of came out of it thinking it was again challenging the ideas of who Data is, challenging his understanding of human emotions by presenting him essentially a new emotion that he's maybe not felt before, where he might have felt hate. Like, he might not understand that's what he was feeling, because again, I'll go back to that statement. I'm not entirely sure that Data doesn't feel, he just doesn't understand that what he's feeling is feelings. Does that make sense?
He assumes it's not feelings, because how can he feel? It's just circuitry, but it probably is.
To him, it's like a series of numbers and ones and O's or whatever that are giving him the idea or the thought that he's having, but he's not like feeling it the same way we do.
If you took away the self-awareness of Data that he is an android and just kind of give him basically a slight memory wipe and told him he was a person, I think he would fully believe it and not understand that his feelings were any different. He would be like, oh, of course, this is what other people feel.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, I do think there's a genuine difference where he doesn't like literally feel it the way we do. He doesn't feel that in the pit of his stomach. That part's probably missing, but
I think he interprets it in the same way, ultimately.
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of getting from. Just given this episode, given the way he was a parent, given all these other... We've
had like 3 or 4 good Data episodes recently, haven't we?
Yeah, I've really kind of been poking at his character and prodding and whatnot. So, I dig this episode quite a bit. I think it might not stand up there with the best of the best episodes, but I think this is another example of season 3 being far more full of like gems and solid explorations of characters in between the really big episodes, and then there's only been a few kind of actual. I mean, I don't even want to use stinker. I mean, the Indiana Picard episode was a bit of a stinker, but that's kind of...
Yeah, no, as much as I say I like this episode less than you, which I think is fair to say,
it's better than
it's a very good episode.
It's better than all but maybe 3 or 4 episodes out of the entire of season 1 and 2.
Yeah, Yeah, I still completely agree that this is representative of the overall higher quality of this season by orders of magnitude. I just didn't like it quite as much as you did. I don't think it's quite into the great territory. It's just in the very good territory.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm still happy with that overall as an episode.
Yeah, that was really good stuff. So, of course, we'll see what's coming next time. That was the most toys. Next time, we have an episode called well,
oh God,
no, this is kind of exciting actually. Sarek.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, there's no spoilers or guesses for who that is that it's referring to. Sarek, of course, the father of Spock. Here's the description via IMDb. Legendary Federation Ambassador Sarek visits the Enterprise to conclude peace talks with a race called the Legarans. His arrival is accompanied with the rash of unusual emotional outbursts among the crew. Interesting.
That's. I mean, I have some speculation as to what's causing that already.
Sure.
Some idea. Well, Vulcans obviously suppress their emotion. Maybe as they get older, I'm kind of thinking like Professor X in Logan. How he kind of just he loses that control and transmits outward almost. I'm wondering if something similar happens with Vulcans.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I have no idea, but it's kind of an exciting big character from.
I'm assuming the same actor as well.
Oh yeah, it looks like it. Outside of obviously the main core cast, this was one of the bigger characters that were recurring. Or I mean, I think it appeared like twice. I think there was maybe 2 appearances.
It was at least 2 or 3 times, and then he was in one of the movies, I think.
It was definitely in a movie or 2. Yeah, he was in a movie or 2, but yeah. Which again, I was kind of discounting that there, but yeah, most of these movies would have been by now. Not all of them, but
the earlier ones for sure.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I mean, in fact, the most recent movie when this episode aired would have been 5 Final Frontier.
Okay, so we've only got one more left.
The God one, yes. So it's interesting. So we'll get Sarek next time. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, you can let us know what you thought of the most toys in the comments below. Do like if you're on YouTube. Liking is really important. It lets the YouTube algorithm know that you want to support us and share us out to other people and recommend us to other people. So please do. You can support us financially over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV for as little as $1 per month and get some bonuses for your troubles. So go and have a look at that. Otherwise, get us on Twitter at @mail_fuzz for channel updates. But that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching Star Trek, guys. And remember, when it comes to the ladies, Wesley Crusher is in complete control.